All right. Well, good morning, everyone. This is the time scheduled for a technical conference in docket number 22-057-03, Dominion Energy Utah's application to increase distribution rates and charges. My name is Shaker Richardson, and I'm PSC's facilitator for this conference. Next, let's have everyone introduce themselves. We'll start with everyone in the room, and then we'll go to everyone on the phone. I don't know if DEU wants to start.
I will. Patricia Schmidt with the Utah Attorney General's Office for the Division of Public Utilities.
I'm Jennifer Clark. I'm counsel for Dominion Energy.
Jordan Stevenson with Dominion Energy.
Jessica Ibsen with Dominion Energy.
Melissa Pascal, PSC.
Chris Parker, Division of Public Utilities.
Casey Coleman with the Division of Public Utilities.
Paul Aiken with the division.
Trevor Jones with the division.
Doug Wheelwright with the division.
Austin Summers with Dominion Energy.
Robert Moore, counsel for the OCS.
Allison Anderson with the Office of Consumer Services.
Alex Ware, also with OCS.
Eric Orton with the division.
Jeff Einfeld with the division.
Kelly Mendenhall with Dominion Energy.
Dr. Nasser Abdullah with the division.
You can introduce yourself.
Oh, Brenda Salter with the division, sorry.
Okay, I think that's everyone in the room. If those on the line would like to introduce themselves.
Phil Russell with UAE.
Good morning, Laura Baker on for Nucor.
Good morning. Kevin Higgins, Consumer Services. Kevin Higgins for UAE.
Courtney Higgins, UAE.
Neil Townsend for UAE. John DeFever with Larkin Associates for the OCS.
Okay, well, thank you. We had some feedback earlier from someone on the line, so we're going to ask that if you're not speaking, if you could please mute yourself. And I think that's everything that we have, so we'll turn the time now to Dominion Energy.
All right, thanks. So, in hindsight, I don't think we thought this scheduled through very well. We asked for questions Friday at 5 before Memorial Day weekend and promised we'd have a presentation ready by Wednesday at 9 a.m. So I do want to thank the division for giving us your questions early. That actually bailed us out, gave us an extra day, so appreciate that. So today I think we'll start off with a few questions on the LNG facility. So apologize for the weird colors. You couldn't see it in its original format, so I kind of had to spruce things up real quick before we started. So just to give you an idea of where we're at currently on the project, we spent $200 million, 92% to date. The facility will be in service the end of October, so we've got about 5 months left. And we will actually be liquefying and injecting before then. So one of the reasons why we wanted to wait to discuss the recovery of the additional costs in this case is because it took one of the unforeseen things off the table. Our estimate of the project won't be an issue because we'll know the final cost of the project before this proceeding's over. So some of you saw this slide in February when we presented it in the technical conference. I've updated it for how much we spent, but the bottom line is, as of right now, we believe we're going to be about $7.4 million higher than the original pre-approval amount. So just to give you some background on that, and there's a lot more detail in here in my testimony. I am going to try and keep this non-confidential, but basically, at the end of last year, our contractor came to us with a number of change orders, both COVID-related and scope-related, and we had some negotiations with them. We ultimately rejected all of their scope changes, but we accepted all of their COVID-related changes that they proposed due to, COVID-related changes that caused material cost increases, as well as supply chain issues. So That number is in my testimony. It's actually higher than 7.4 million. We were able to absorb a portion of that just through the regular cost of the project. But that's currently where we stand, and what is causing the cost increase. There's also an increase due to some restrictive covenants I'll talk about in a little bit, but that's another increase to the project as well. And that number is confidential. It is in my testimony, but we'll talk about that a little bit
But
more.
that's not
in a couple
included in the
slides.
7.4, right?
What's that?
That's not included in that.
Right, that's in
7.4.
addition to the
Okay.
7.4.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Questions on that? Okay, question number 2 was asking about what was the original contingency when you filed for pre-approval versus what it is today. So this just gives you kind of a summary of where we were at. So to give you some background, in 2019, we filed this case. This estimate, the $211.2 million, was provided by HDR Consulting, which is an engineering group. We asked them to put together an estimate of what we thought the facility would cost. And included in that estimate was a contingency of $24.1 million. So they basically just looked at the whole project and said, you know, these are the components, this is the material cost, this is what it would cost to engineer it, and then they built in this contingency. So you fast forward to May of 2020, we did an RFP, we selected a consultant. It ended up being the lowest cost qualified consultant, I would say. And in their bid, they gave us a price to cover everything, you know, similar to, if you've ever built a house or done a remodel, you know how contractors work, they give you a price, and that's the price. So you'll notice the contingency dropped considerably, and I think that's because they were going to take on a lot of the cost responsibility. Just to give you an idea, without going into confidential information, they're taking on more than half the cost of this project. In fact, if you were to remove the land from this price right here, their fee to build the facility would be almost 70% of the total project cost. So they're taking on, you know, a lot in terms of materials, in terms of labor, in terms of just building the facility. And so they I'm sure built into their estimate a contingency. I mean, they're not going to tell us what it is, but they built a cushion into that. And so once that had been done, this is where we were at from a company standpoint on our contingency at $4.3 million. And then at today, we had the increase in costs, which I've talked about, and we're at today a contingency of $3.7 million. So it kind of gives you a feel for how things have developed.
And that reduction is in part because the scope of your risk has declined as the project has moved forward, or?
Yeah, and I would also say some of the overrun may have also been absorbed a little bit in there as well. Yeah. So like I said, we'll have a really good idea of what this number is come October when the project is winding up and is substantially complete. But as of today, this is where our construction group thinks we're at, where we're at. Question number 3. The increase in the thermal expansion zone was identified in the 4th quarter. Please explain why a requirement change and the potential cost increase were not presented to the commission. So I feel like this question is directed to me personally, so I'm going to give you my timetable I was working from. So I didn't really, this really didn't hit my radar in the 4th quarter of 2020. I know the pipeline safety group under the division was working with our project managers. It really hit my radar in June when we received some data requests from the division, really kind of getting into the details of what needs to be included in the restrictive covenant, what does it need to include, and so there was a lot of discussion at that point, and that's when I got involved. We had a lot of discussion, a lot of you were involved with that, from June to September, where we talked about what exactly needs to be done to meet. Basically, we had to buy this additional easement or restrictive covenant to cover PHMSA regulation in terms of just keeping the area around the LNG facility protected. So basically what this restrictive covenant does is it keeps the property owners from being able to build buildings, it does get a little, I don't want to say silly, but there won't be any corn mazes or escape rooms or big gatherings. And if you've ever been out to the LNG facility, you know that would never happen anyway because it's in the middle of nowhere. It's in a place no one would ever want to hang out. But that's all been built in the restrictive covenant. So at the time we were discussing with the division, we talked to our right-of-way group and said, hey, what do you think this is going to cost? They gave us an estimate. I'll tell you that estimate, in my mind, was not material, not anything I was really worried about. So there were two property owners we dealt with. The first one we signed in September 20th, and if you go into my testimony, you can see who these property owners were and what we paid. I will tell you the first restrictive covenant was along the lines of what our right-of-way people thought these were going to end up costing us. You can see the second restrictive covenant didn't get signed until January. That's because there was a lot of back and forth on cost. That second restrictive covenant was considerably more expensive. And I will say they had appraisals to back it up. The second group that we were working with, it turns out the inland port has caused land prices out there to go up a lot. And so they were able to take advantage of that. So we signed that second restrictive covenant. At that point, that's when we knew what the total cost would be, and then we shared that with the commission February 17th in our technical conference. So it's kind of the timeline. That's why we didn't share anything in the fourth quarter of 2020. There's a question about O&M expenses. So HDR, our contractor, I mentioned earlier, they gave us an estimate of what we thought, or what they thought it would cost to operate the LNG facility, and that's the amount that is in the rate case. I do think there's a data request out there, I think it's the third set from the office that asks for more detail on this. So stay tuned on that, and you'll probably be getting that in the next week or two. Well, probably more like, probably 2 weeks. So that's an easy one to answer. Okay, so this may be news to some of you. I know some of you it's not. So please discuss and identify the amount of O&M costs that will be removed from the general rate case if the electricity cost for the LNG facility is approved to be included in the 191 filing. So later today, we're actually filing a pass-through, $94 million pass-through. Included in that is a proposal to include the electric costs related to injecting, or not liquefying natural gas, which is injecting it. And so because of the timing of everything, because of the timing of the rate case and the pass-through, our intention was always to file in the pass-through, but we didn't know whether the commission would approve it or not, and so to cover our bases, we also included it in the general rate case. So we included $2.1 million in both the pass-through and the general rate case. We believe it belongs in the pass-through. I will give you the reasons why. One, due to this facility's use, it's very difficult to estimate how much it will be used in any given year. If we have some serious weather events or serious supply issues in the winter, we could use this entire facility and fill it all the way back up. In a winter when we really don't use it at all, we would probably just cycle at 15%. So the cost to inject is going to be very variable. You add to that the fact that we're paying an electric rate, which I would imagine if it's anything like our rates is going to be quite variable over the next year or 2 years or 3 years. So that's another unknown. The other thing is we treat all of our injection costs as supplier non-gas costs. So the injection costs at Clay Basin, at the aquifers, those are all treated as injection costs. So those are treated through the pass-through. And then additionally, as we talk to our affiliates who have LNG facilities in North Carolina, they treat these costs as commodity pass-through costs as well. So just to give you some background on why we think it fits in the pass-through. So assuming that our proposal, we're filing today, we're going to propose an effective date on the pass-through of August 1st. So we'll know by August 1st whether this should be included in the pass-through or not. If it is included in the pass-through, we will remove $2.1 million from the general rate case. Obviously, we don't want double counting there. So interesting picture here. This is actually the ice box is what it's called. And that's where the natural gas is cooled. I believe it's negative 260 degrees. And that's where it actually becomes a liquid and then it goes into the LNG facility. So that is where the magic happens and where most of the electric costs are going to be incurred. Questions on that? All right. My last slide. Please describe how the LNG facility is anticipated to be used once completed. Is the anticipated usage of the LNG facility different than from other stored resources? So I did want to just give you a kind of an overview of our various storage facilities because I think it's interesting and useful, not only in the general rate case, but just in terms of other filings that we make. So we have 3 facilities. We have Clay Basin, we have the aquifers, and we have the LNG facility. So Clay Basin is our biggest facility. It's also the furthest away from our supply, from our demand area, the valley and Utah in general. The benefit that it has is we can use it year-round. So we will use this facility in the summer. We'll take our Wexpro supply and other gas that we're buying at lower cost. We'll put it in the facility, and then we can pull it out in the winter to use it. And then you can see it's the biggest in terms of capacity, 13.4 million decatherms, which allows us to use it all. We could use it almost every single day. We're guaranteed 111,000 decatherms of withdrawal capacity, but that can also be increased depending on how many other people are using it. So we could actually have more withdrawal capacity depending on the day. So that's kind of the crown jewel of the storage facilities. That's the one that we use the most. Honestly, I don't think we could get by without that one. And it's controlled by a third-party Mountain West pipeline. It used to be an affiliate of ours. The aquifers are closer to our system, but they're still off system. The benefit that they have is that you can see they have a pretty good withdrawal capacity. They can also be cycled very quickly. So you drain that thing. You can drain them down fairly quickly, but you can also fill them up very quickly, much quicker than you could the LNG facility. So they have the ability. You have the ability to, if you're in a price environment where you're getting big swings in weather or big swings in price, you're able to drain it and refill it and use it in that capacity, and it's very effective. So we use that facility anytime there's high demand. So basically every cold winter day we're using it. Will was also using it in March and April, and when we were seeing high prices, he was using it to kind of hedge some of those prices. So it does have a lot of flexibility. Once again, it's also managed by Mountain West Pipeline, third party. Then the LNG facility is really designed for backup supply. So it's designed in case we lose supply at storage facilities, or if there's well freeze-offs in Wyoming, or even if you had an earthquake that hit the major line. If this was the summer, the LNG facility could actually hold our system for probably a couple of weeks by itself. So there are a lot of benefits to this facility, even the fact that it's on system and the fact that it's west of the fault line and the fact that we own it give it a lot of benefits. So the main benefit is supply reliability, but it can also be used in a high price environment like we had back in February of I guess it would have been 2021, right? 2021 or 2020.
21.
When was the Texas? 21 was the Texas winter, the Texas event. So you could use it there as well to help mitigate prices. You know, when we had prices over $120, that would have helped a lot. So that gives you an overview of the different storage facilities and how they're used. So this is your last chance to ask me any questions before I pass this off to Jordan. All right.
Thanks, Kelly. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jordan Stevenson. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. And I was putting these slides together and thought I'd do a timeline. And I guess by way of introduction, I know most people in here, but some people may not know me. As I was doing this timeline, I realized I've been in the regulatory group with Dominion Energy since, well, Questar Gas since 2012. Kelly hired me back then. And I don't know how most people track milestones in your career, but if you come up in a regulatory group, it's like rate cases. So this is my 4th rate case. That's how long I've been. I helped file our 2013 rate case, and we've done 3 since then. 2016 kind of counts, but we withdrew it later on, but I still count it. But it's a pleasure to be with you. And to the theme of milestones, so I thought, so the next few questions from the division deal with the tracker. We have questions about the tracker investment and questions about the revenue and what causes the volatility. So I put a couple slides together to talk about those 2 things. And this is kind of a high-level overview annually. And the top half of this chart shows the tracker budget, so the capital investment that we're spending each year. And the bottom half of this chart shows tracker revenues by year. And so you can see as we continue to spend annually a certain amount of dollars, and these are all in millions, to replace pipe, gradually the revenues coming through the tracker infrastructure rate adjustment start to grow. And so turning your attention down to the bottom half of the graph, the revenues, and I will point out too, the years you see in the middle line up with the dollars down here. So these are all on the same timeline. In 2011, we collected $4 million through the tracker surcharge. That grew to 10 and then 18. And then we had a dip down to 9 million. And what happened that year in 2014 is a general rate case went into effect. And what happens when we file the general rate case is all of our investment gets rolled into the distribution non-gas rate through the base D&G rate in the general rate case. And the tracker rate is reset to 0. So that's why there's a drop in 2014. Now it doesn't go to 0 because we still had 2 months of tracker rate collection. The base D&G rate took effect in March of 2014. So 9 million was collected in 2 months. Then it continues to grow again, and you see a drop there in 2020, and that again is when the base D&G rate was reset in the general rate case. So all of the investment we had invested through 2020 was rolled in to the base D&G rate. Tracker rates were reset to 0. We collected 2 months worth of revenue in 2020 through the tracker program, and that equated to 13 million that year. And then we started fresh again. And so I'm going to turn my attention to the division questions and zoom in on the last 3 years you see here, 2020, 2021, and 2022, which is what the questions pertain to. Or sorry, 2019 through 2021. And I didn't have room to write out the questions like Kelly did on his slide, so I'll just read the questions and refer to them. So in DPU question 7, the question is, please explain the relationship between the infrastructure tracker revenue recorded for 2019, 2020, and 2021, and the relationship with the $80.4 million allowed in base rates. I'm going to walk through this. Again, this is organized the same way. So the top half is related to plant balances. So this is how much rate base was actually in rates, in the tracker surcharge, or in base rates. So you see different colors on the top half of the graph. The green color represents the tracker rate. So investment that was included in the infrastructure tracker rate. We are allowed under the tracker to come in twice a year and reset that tracker surcharge based on how much investment has been spent. And so this is the investment balance that had been included in that rate calculation. So you see in 2019, we had a little over $300 million accumulated in the tracker rate calculation. And we filed twice a year, so at the tail end of 2019, you can see it tick up a little bit in October, and then it ticked up a little bit again in December, and that is when we came in and filed a tracker surcharge rate. So we rolled more investment into the tracker surcharge. Now the different colors you see here are, this is investment that was rolled into the base D&G rates. So we had a rate case that took effect March of 2020. So all of the investment that had been spent to date rolled in to the base D&G rate, and the tracker surcharge was reset to 0. So there's a blue amount and a red amount. The blue amount is pre-2019 investment, and the red amount is what we forecasted in the general rate case. And that's the $80.4 million that the division refers to in their question. So when we filed, we had a partial forecast in 2019 and a full year forecast in 2020. And some of that forecasted investment included tracker investment. And that equated to $80.4 million. So we included $80.4 million in the base D&G rate calculation in the general rate case that took effect March of 2020. Now because we included that, we reset the tracker rates to 0, and I'm going to cover this bottom half more thoroughly. But we reset the tracker rates to 0. We were now collecting our new D&G rate that included this much tracker investment. And so we couldn't file for a new tracker again until we had put into service at least this much investment, including the 80.4. And then you see the tracker balance start to tick up again. And that's when we finally spent enough and put enough into investment to get over the 80.4 million. And that happened in January of 2021. We start to have tracker-related investment again rolled into the tracker surcharge. So turning our attention to the bottom half, you can see the revenues coming in by month, January through December. It's a seasonal. Is that me?
Sorry.
Navigation. Okay. I was just riding my bike in and I had navigation going. Did I shut that off? So you can see the tracker revenue is seasonal. In 2019, we collected, I believe it was 34 million total. We had a couple months in 2020, January and February. It's a little small, but if you can see, we had 2 months worth of investment that equated to 13 million in 2020. And then in March of 2020, revenues just went to 0 through the tracker surcharge. And that's because all of the investment rolled out of the surcharge into base D&G rates. Because we don't want to double collect revenues on the same investment, we have to set the tracker rate to 0 the moment that base D&G rates roll that investment in. And then we don't collect any tracker revenue through the rest of 2020. And then in January of 2021, we started collecting a little bit of tracker revenue related to that little bit of green investment you see up there that eclipses what was included in the rate case. So it's a little bit complex. I was hoping this graphic would help explain how this works, but let me make sure we answer these 4 questions. So I'm covering 4 questions with this graph. So we talked about the first one. The second one is what causes the variation in revenue numbers from 2019 to 2020 to 2021. So part of it is just seasonal, if you're looking at it monthly, and then you can see what causes revenues to drop in 2020 is that we set the tracker rate to 0 because all of the investment rolled into the base D&G rate. DPU 9 asks, what year does the 80.4 million infrastructure allowance in base rates from the prior general rate case relate to? And what it was the 2019 and 2020 forecasted numbers. So beginning January 2019 through the year end of 2020, we included 80.4 million. So we had to spend and put into service 80.4 million beginning in January of 2019 before we could start the tracker again. And then in DPU question 10.
I think Chris had a question, or somebody had a question.
So
You have a question? Yeah.
the ultimate basis for that 80.4 number though goes back further in time, right?
So, no, actually the 80.4 is just from 2019 forward. And the prior stuff I've included in this blue chart, it's 309 million. So we have more in the tracker than the 80.4.
I guess my real question was that the 80.4 that's just an escalated number that's come to be after all the years of where your tracker started at whatever million, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So I think we've rolled in all of the prior feeder line tracker investment into base rates.
Yeah.
And so what he's saying is
It's new there, yeah.
the threshold that we need to meet, and you're doing it to relate it to this case, it would be the investment in the tracker from 2020, January 1st of 2022 through
December
of 2023. There's a slide here where he's created a new threshold that we have to overcome.
Yeah.
Because that's in base rates, and then everything over that we get recovered.
But that number itself is derived from sort of the initial proposal and then escalated over time through the life of the tracker project, right?
Yeah, all of the investment from the tracker since the beginning of time is in base rates. Yeah.
Jeff has a question.
Question.
Move
Question.
on.
We have another, yeah, Jeff.
So I'm looking at the top line, okay? And the green number or the green bars through September 19, okay? That amount looks like it then converts to the blue line starting in March of 2020. And so you've got excess, or you've got additional green line value, I'm gonna call it, starting in October of 2019 where it ticks up, and then in December 2019 it ticks up some more. And that's not part of, so that's gotta be part of the red line then,
Yep.
right?
Yep, that's
And
part of
then-
that forecasted incremental investment.
Okay, and so then the rest of the increment of the red line that's in excess of the larger blue or green lines, that then is part of is that the 80.4 million?
That's the 80.4.
Okay.
Yep.
So the difference between that gets you almost to 400 million then is that the 80.4 million goes from where your top green line is to where the top of your red line is on top of the blue.
Yep.
If that makes sense. And then the green line out here on the right-hand part of that the new green line that stacks on top of the red is from basically down below where you've got new tracker numbers now starting to stack on top of that.
Yeah.
So I'm understanding that part, right? Now, your prior slide, if you can go back to your prior slide, and on the bottom half where the green are, you start at 9 million, and then you go to 10, 14, and it goes up to 34 million. That's the reason it got up to 34 million is because in 2016, the rate case was canceled.
Yep.
And so the balances in the tracker, I mean, it accumulated, it didn't get reset to zero, so it continued to accumulate for the activity for that entire 6-year period instead of just a 3-year period. And so that's why it escalated up to 34 million there, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, normally, so we're on a 3-year pattern, so it would have gone into effect 2017, and it would have dropped back down, but you're right, because we went through the rate case. It continued to accumulate in the tracker surcharge.
Okay. Now, one other question that I have is with regard to the tracker. I mean, the tracker, all of your capital investment and expenditure is not captured in the tracker, correct?
Right.
What percentage of your capital expenditure ends up getting captured in the tracker, if you guys know that?
Yeah, so we're spending around 75 million currently, and I believe our current budget per year is just a bit under 300 million. Talking broadly, and we have it in my testimony, but I don't have it memorized. I think.
So kind of 75 million is captured in the tracker. Your total expenditure is something around 300.
Yeah.
So something less than
25%.
Yeah, 25 to 30%, basically. Okay.
All right, I think we covered the tracker questions. Any final? Okay. Actually, we have one more tracker question. On its own slide. So that 80.4 million that we just talked about, we have a similar amount in this case. Like Kelly said, we forecasted beginning January of 2022 through 2023 for our 2023 test period. And that amount that we have forecasted, we want to make sure that we don't start tracking again in the tracker surcharge until we have gone over that amount beginning in January of 2022. And so this just walks through that calculation of what's included in the test period and what the threshold is. So we have 2022 additions plus 2023 additions. So to come up with the 2022 addition number, we start with our capital budget of $77.4 million in the 2022 budget. Now, not all of that will be close to investment. So we subtract out the portion we estimate to be in construction work in process at the end of 2022. Because this will not be in service, we cannot add it to the tracker surcharges rate base. So the amount of actual additions ends up being the net 48.8 million that's included in 2022 additions. Then we have 2023 additions, which is a similar formula. We have a capital budget we'll be spending. We will also have construction work in process at the end of 2023. However, the 2022 portion will be closed by the end of 2023, so we add back in the construction work in process from the prior year. So total net additions in 2023 end up being 77.4 million. Now, because we average our test period, and 2023 is the test period, after you average the rate base, we actually add 35.9 million to rate base in 2023, to average rate base. When you add the 48.8 from 2022 to the 35.9, rate base is increasing by 84.7 million in our proposed rate case model. And so that is what would be included in base rates beginning on January 1st of 2023 when rates go into effect. So we would reset the tracker rate to 0. The base D&G rate would now be collecting on $84.7 million of investment, and we will have to spend $84.7 million, or put into service $84.7 million before we start tracking again, starting January 2022 forward. So that's what the new threshold is, assuming the way we proposed it here.
So this is calculated the same as it was in the last rate case?
Yep, calculated the same way. Okay.
Is the CWIP just a plug number, or do you look at what projects will be completed?
So CWIP is based on a system-wide factor. So we use a 3-year average in the model, and we look at for every dollar we spent in capital budget, how much was left over in CWIP at the end of the year. We look at it for 3 years, and we calculate an average, and that's what we apply to all capital spend.
So you're not looking at the specific projects that are planned and saying this will be completed in this year versus what's not?
Oh, we didn't go project by project.
So that's why your minus 28.6 and your plus 28.6 is the same, is because it's using the same average of 3 years.
Yeah, it's using an average. Okay, so the next set of questions, this will cover DPU 12 through 14. So the question on 12 is, 12 and 13 both relate to pandemic costs. So 12 is, please discuss the impact the pandemic may have had on historical costs that will be included in historical averages or base year calculations. So we do use 2021 as the base period, as the foundation for what will be in the test period in 2023. So we've come through 2021 and identified COVID-related items. And to summarize, we do have an increase in costs in 2021 related to the pandemic for materials and software configuration. There was a project to help virtual work and things like that happened that carried into 2021, started in 2020. So that's $96,000. We also had a massive decrease in travel and training. In 2020, it was pretty much zero, and that remained frozen through a good part of 2021. Near the end of 2021, we started doing a little bit more travel and training, but it's $384,000 less than the 2019 period or the pre-pandemic period. So the net impact to the base period 2021 was a reduction of $288,000 in expenses. Now the way we forecast our test period is we take 2021 actual and we use different inflation factors to carry that forward. So the $288,000 did get carried forward into 2023 as a reduction in expense. We did not do any special adjustment for that. And then I did want to point out that in 2021 we also incurred a one-time expense of $409,000 for a vaccination incentive program to try to bribe as many employees as we could to get vaccinated by the end of the year. So that ended up being a $409,000 expense, but we did exclude that specifically from the 2023 test period. That came through labor and payroll. So the labor forecast portion of the model has excluded that, and it's not included in the test period. So that's all the COVID-related items. And then the next question, DPU 14, asked to explain a $250,000 non-labor cost saving in 2023. So I think this comes in my non-labor O&M exhibit. There's we walk through the inflation factors and how we forecast 2023, and at the very bottom there's just a $250,000 reduction, and that ties back to our rate case model. There's an adjustment for that reduces 2023 expense, and it's part of an ongoing effort to improve efficiency. We met as a group with the finance area, and they had identified some reorganization they had found between two departments that they think will improve efficiency, and told us that it would be a $250,000 saving. So that's where that number comes from, and it is in the 4.20 model, exhibit 4.20 as its own tab. All right, we've got a question on the capital budget. And the question was, please discuss, and this is my second to last slide, just to give you the light at the end of the tunnel. Please discuss the $272 million in actual capital spending in 2020 compared to the $253 million authorized by the Commission in docket number 19-05702, which was our last general rate case. So I thought I'd just reconcile what was going on. A little bit of background: in the last general rate case, the division did file the position that we had overstated our budget for 2020 by $24.7 million, which also included an increase to the tracker program that we had requested to increase that to $80 million, which was a $7.8 million increase. The Commission ultimately approved a reduction to our 2020 capital budget for cost recovery in the model, and so that reduced our total filed budget down to $253 million. And reading the Commission order, part of that was because we included in a project list items that said bucket or blanket type activities, and in part because that reduction also includes the Commission did deny the request to increase the tracker scope, and so we remain at we did not get the $7.8 million increase that we requested. So this table just walks through the commission's order. We had filed 277 million, including the tracker request. After you back out the tracker request, and another 16.9 million to get to the 24.7 total reduction, the adjusted budget was 253 million. That was included in the cost recovery model, the revenue requirement model. And now we go to what actually occurred. So we were able to reduce tracker spend. The company did not spend the 80 million in tracker. However, the company did not reduce other projects. So ultimately we ended up adjusting the budget to 270 million in 2020. And the actual spend came in at 272 million. So we were $2 million higher than the adjusted budget after reducing the tracker. Part of the reason for that is that these blankets, and I kind of walked through this in my testimony, these blankets or buckets, it wasn't a very good presentation on our part, but they are real capital projects that are in response to customer growth. So every time a customer calls and wants a new meter, that goes into a blanket or a bucket project. So meters, mains, service lines, those kind of things are all counted in that way. And just due to the requirement of customer growth, maintenance on the system to ensure safety and reliability, we did end up needing to spend what we had forecast. So that difference between the 253 that was approved and the 272 of what we spent has just been borne by shareholders to this point. It's not included in any rates. Any questions on that? Okay. Final questions were related to the lead lag study. So question 16 asks, please discuss significant changes in the lead lag study. And 17 asks, discuss any impact that the pandemic may have had on the calculation of the lead lag study. So we've not made any changes to the methodologies from what was approved in the last general rate case. In the last rate case, we did request to include a couple new items that hadn't been in the lead lag study prior to that. That was depreciation expense and deferred income tax expenses. That request was not approved, so we excluded that this time around. And the methodologies other than that have been the same, with the exception of one item, and that's for collection lag days. And I'm going to walk through what collection lag is. But for that one item, we actually ended up doing a 3-year average of 2019, 2020, and 2021. The rest of the study is based on 2020 data, which is normally how we do. We pick 1 year for the study, and we do the full comprehensive study on that 1 year. For this item, we did a 3-year average. So I'm going to explain why we did that and what that is. So that's part of our revenue lag calculation in the lead lag study. And you can find the revenue lag in my 3.29 exhibit between pages 5 and 21 of that exhibit. That's where all the revenue lags are calculated. The revenue lag is made up of 3 main components. There's the service lag, which is how long it takes us to read the meter from when service is delivered. So we measure that by looking at the midpoint of service and the meter read date, and that lag is called the service lag. The billing lag is from the point when we read the meter to when we actually create a bill and send a bill. So there's some time required to do that. It's just a couple days, not a lot. And then the final is the collection lag, and that's the time it takes us to collect revenue from when we send the bill. And that's the longest part of the equation. And so collection lag is divided, it's calculated by dividing our average accounts receivable balance, our daily accounts receivable balance, by our average daily revenues. And how that works is if you imagine you have a certain amount of accounts receivable you have to collect, if you know what the rate of revenues is you're collecting, you can calculate how many days it's going to take. So you just take that average balance divided by the daily revenues you're collecting. So if you have a balance of $20 and you're collecting $5 a day, it'll take you 4 days to get to 20. So it's the quickest, easiest way to calculate that lag. So that lag increased significantly since the last study, and several factors contributed to that. First off, the bill print process was moved from Utah to Arizona, so now from when we bill customers, there's a little additional lag there. They think it's 1 to 2 days more for that. The remittance center, so where checks end up when customers write checks, was moved from Salt Lake City to Virginia, which also added some time to the calculation. The third point was, and we think this is by far the largest contributor, but the number of customers that have enrolled into auto pay has increased significantly since the last period. 2017 was when we measured the last study compared to 2020. And this one was counterintuitive to me. I thought auto pay would mean we're collecting quicker and easier, but it's actually, so when customers enroll for auto pay, the default is that the payment goes out on the due date, versus, when you're writing a check or responding to mail, oftentimes you send the check. You wouldn't wait till, I guess I wouldn't wait till the very last day. So the more customers that enroll into auto pay, the more the lag days actually increase because it just defaults to the very last possible day. And then the fourth point here is related to pandemic impacts. We did waive late fees, and we were not disconnecting customers for service or overdue accounts in 2020. And so we did think, we don't have a scientific way to measure exactly what that impact is, but we do think that could have impacted it. So that's why we decided to do an average instead of just relying on 1 year. So we're averaging collection lag using 2019, 2020, and 2021 data for that item. I think that's the last question. Is there any additional questions?
So in a lead lag study, you're using pandemic years for where you made adjustments to your billing, your collections and all of that stuff. Was that the best years you should have used, or should you have gone back further and maybe done 5 years or something instead of a 3-year average?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think the reason we decided to do a 3-year average was because there are other trends that we wanted to pick up on. The last study in 2017 was pre-merger data, so we weren't even part of Dominion Energy yet. And there's been all kinds of overhauls. A new accounting system, the billing center's been moved. In addition to these trends we're seeing with customers going on to auto pay and what's that done. So it's kind of a trade-off. It's, if you draw the line too far back, you're gonna lose some real things that have occurred. So that's why we decided to do a 3-year average.
How many customers are on that auto pay? I mean, is it 10%?
We're up to
30%?
a third right now. Of our customers, a little under a third.
And it went from like 21% to 31%, right?
Yeah. So it's been at 10%.
So you had a pretty significant increase.
Yeah.
Also on your 2019, 20, and 21, 2019 is pre-pandemic, so that's probably about the best year you're gonna get. And then 2020 was hit pretty hard. 2021, you're kind of coming out of it. 2022, you're still kind of coming out of it, so.
Right. Jeff reminded me in the last case we had a formula that just didn't sum right. That we checked that one this time. That has been corrected. I should have mentioned that, but in the methodology change we eliminated a sum error in the model. But.
An addition error.
All right. Well, I think that's our final question. Any parting words, Kelly?
No. Thank you. Have a nice day.
All right, well, if there are no other questions, we'll conclude the tech conference.
Thanks.
Thanks for everything.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.